John here with Ripewave Audio with our second video with the Yamaha flagship AV receiver, the Aventage A8A. And this unit sells for $3,500. It's a step up from their A6A, also in the Aventage line, but is $1,000 more than the A6A. The A6A being $2,500, has two less channels of amplification, but on the surface, really, that's the main difference. This is 11 channels of amplification, 150 watts per channel versus the 9 channels at 150 watts for the A6A. Now, both of these units have 11 channels of processing. That's for a 7.2.4 configuration. That's 7 ear levels, 2 subwoofers, and 4 height channels. It does also have capabilities for bi-amping, and there's up to 3 zones that you can configure outputs for, and we'll go through this. The original video that we did was focused on just our initial impressions, a quick overview of what the unit is, but now we're going to get into some of the setup. We have this up and running. Our initial impressions is this is a very good unit, and a few notes just on the physical here. We covered a little of that in the last video. This is a very sturdy unit. Don't be taken back by the ABS plastic top. The whole top of this is got airflow on it, open up. But if you were to remove the ABS plastic, this is not a plastic frame. The whole frame is metal. So just below this top cosmetic piece is a full top that is metal with perforations on it, folded in nice ways to keep it very strong. This is an H-frame design. Everything that Yamaha has done with this unit has been pretty much high quality, big transformer. It's an E-core transformer, which Yamaha believes is better suited for this application versus a toroid, and because of the different voltages that it has to handle, and they can have different windings that are dedicated for different functions of this AV receiver. But a lot of attention to not just the rigidity of the frame, but vibration dampening. There's dampeners all along the different components that make up the chassis. They have their classic 5th foot, which you may be able to see right under here. They moved it forward from previous designs to sit in such a way to minimize vibrations and everything. The toroidal transformer itself, because that can generate some vibrations, is kind of isolated from the rest of the unit. So they've done a lot to the design physically. The one point that I'll continue to make this from the last, I wish they had, with all this attention to detail, done a little better with the volume knob. Now there is resistance to this, and I will say that is nice here, but it does feel like it's rubbing a little bit on something. So that was a little disappointed. I wish they could do a little better job on the volume knob, but maybe I was a little too harsh on them last time. Now that I've used this for a bit, it's not oh so bad, but I wish they could have done a little bit better. The other thing they could have done better with is on the 2-line display, which is a little small, albeit they do, when you make changes, it blows it up bigger so you can see it from a distance. So they made some effort, despite its smaller size, to make it functionally usable, a lot better than the Cinema 50 behind me with its porthole design. So I definitely would say this is better than the Marantz porthole, but they could have done more with modern technology on that. So that's on those cosmetic pieces. I have one correction from the last video, is on the backlight. Now, I was doing that last video on the fly, unboxing it, and I just threw some batteries in it, and I says, okay, it doesn't appear to have a backlight because there's no backlight button on this. It does have backlight. I put the battery in backwards on the second battery and made the correction there. And what I really like about this remote, and I would say this is uh, a little better than what Marantz does, is they have a button to turn the backlight on and off. Uh, as soon as you pick this up, it senses motion and it turns the backlight on. I like this. Uh, compared to the Marantz remote, just physically, um, this has, although they both have some weight to it. So um, I just like the backlight better on the Yamaha remote that they've implemented here. Let's talk about the setup now. This I found to be one of the easiest units to get up and running and set up. First of all, the out-of-the-box experience, I essentially plugged in my amplifiers to this. Now, I always initially configure up the AV receivers that we bring in here with 100% external amplifiers as allowed by the AV receiver. Now, this particular unit has full pre-outs, so I can take every output and bring it to an external amplifier, and that's just what I did. But when I powered this up, doing nothing, it ran all of my speakers, my 11 speakers and 2 subwoofers without an issue, and it sounded great out of the box, doing nothing, making no configuration changes. And I find that to be wonderful. Now, I finally powered it up. I did the on-screen display, and I'll share some of these experiences with you now here. When you first get into the Yamaha menus and you hit the setup button, it brings you to this menu system. It's a little graphical, not quite as elegant as what you would see on a Denon or Marantz product, but very functional and still graphical. They have a concept called patterns, and they give you up to 4 patterns in here. Now, pattern 1, I've already gone through and run the YPAO setup. Pattern 2, I did some manual calibration using some external tools. And pattern 3 and 4 I have not utilized yet. So let's just leave it on pattern 3 just to give you a sense of what it displays when you first pull this up. Now, it's giving you some indication here of whether your speakers are large or small by putting a little circle next to it. And that circle is either going to be a light blue color or a magenta purplish color for large. Now, out of the box, these are all set to small. That means it's going to direct a lot of the bass over to your subwoofers instead of trying to pump it out through the speaker itself. Now, I went in and did no changes to these, but you can get into that. But let's go into the natural flow on this, is to go into the power amp assign. Now, if you're used to other products, the amp assign gives you methods of disconnecting certain amplifiers. Now, I found that in this case, on the power amp assign, the choices are limited to what they have available here. Now, initially it's set up to what they call a basic amp assign. Now, this is still going to be able to power all the 11 speakers, as we noticed when we first pulled it up. It gives you some indication here by a color code around the speakers. It's showing the speakers in the corner as what Yamaha labels as presence. Now, I usually call these height speakers. Height speakers can either be mounted high on the wall or on your speaker, or occasionally people are using the reflective speakers that Dolby has put out, that speaker companies use per Dolby specifications for Atmos. But they call them presence speakers, and they're showing here that the extra speaker 1 is going to be used for your front present or height speakers, and the extra speaker 2 is going to be used for the rear present speakers. It's showing that we're not doing any bi-amplification by default. There's no use of the extra speaker 3 terminals. Now, we showed in the prior video, there's more speaker terminals, amplifier for the amplifiers on the back of this than there are actual amplifiers. And what it will do is shift relays internally to direct those amplifiers out to different speaker terminals based off these amp assign settings. So nothing's going to be routing for bi-amplification. There's no extra speaker 3, and an external amplifier is set to none here. However, it doesn't mean that your pre-outs aren't working, even though the external amp is set to none. In fact, I had this entirely with external amplifiers, and everything worked from the beginning. In fact, this particular unit also gives you a choice for your front speakers, left and right only, to use balanced outputs for that out to your amplifiers. And that's exactly what I did. Everything else I used unbalanced because I didn't have a choice, including the center speaker and the subwoofer. So it's just the front, left, and right that you can do the balanced output. But we're glad to see that because not many AV receivers have balanced outputs for front channels. One product I can name that I do know is the new Integra flagship, which gives you balanced outputs, I believe, for not just left and right, but for center channel, and also for your 2 subwoofers. So Integra has one up on that category. But here's the amp assign, and we can go into the details here, and they have some predefined configurations here where different allocation of those speaker terminals based off of what you might want to use for these 11 channels of amplification. And as we go through this, it shows different configurations with zone outputs. So you're using some of the internal amplifications for zones instead of for your present speakers, etc. You even have other configurations where bi-amplification is actually turned on. Of course, each time you add something like a bi-amp or a zone output, less amplifiers are going to be available for your standard 7.2.4 configuration or something less than 7.x.4. But yeah, these are ones that are built in. I found for what I'm doing, the basic is fine because that is still going to enable the full use of 11 channels for one home theater for 7.2.4, which is the maximum configuration for your home theater. And I don't care at this point for using any of the zone outputs. So that's where I left it, but you will decide that. But there isn't a wholesale, I'm going to turn off all amplifiers and quiet this down like you can on some of the Denon Marantz products. My question is that really necessary if the unit has clean outputs regardless? So in Denon Marantz cases, the shutting down of the amplifiers do have an impact and do improve the sound quality. So when you go into the configuration, you can see that you have all the different speakers listed here. For each one, you can determine if they're large or small and what the crossover is going to be. I did not make any of these changes here before running the room calibration software that comes with this. And this is the Yamaha YPAO system. That's the only calibration that's available to this. Now, my understanding is the latest iteration of YPAO has greatly improved over prior generations. And my experience with it is it's running pretty well. And I don't hear a lot of reviewers talk highly of YPAO, but I was very happy with it. And again, with the simplicity in which it runs. Now, let me bring into view here the actual microphone. I happen to have this stand here that came with it. Some people call it a boomerang. It doesn't come with the microphone holder stand that I have it on, but what you get is this plastic piece here. I'll just angle it a little bit so you can see better. With 1, 2, 3 positions and a fourth one on the top. Now, if you don't care about measuring your angles and distances of the heights of your ceiling speakers, you really only have to measure one position. We'll show you that in the setup screen here. On the bottom of the YPAO microphone, which is provided with the unit, there is a screw here that fits on a standard camera tripod. But the microphone also fits into positions on the stand, and the stand itself has a similar threading to fit on a camera tripod or a microphone stand as we're using here. And when you're able to use this stand in these 4 different positions, it will actually calculate speaker height and angles that just with these positions here. Now, it will allow for multi-seat adjustments, but you can just do it with a single seat and be up and running and get very good result, and it runs pretty quick. So to get this activated, the only thing I had to do, because you're saying, well, I don't see a menu choice to go into YPAO here. We just see these speaker settings. They have at the other end, this is an 1/8-inch phono jack, and we just plug it into the front of the unit. And when I do that, the menu automatically appears for YPAO. And it gives you some choices before you start. Am I going to do multi-measure? Now, if you have several seating positions, you would select multi-measure, and you can do up to 8 different positions in the room to optimize this. I didn't bother with it because I'm usually listening to this just myself, and I just started with 1 for simplicity. But angle height measure. So with this, that means that for the portion of the calibration, it will use this boomerang style stand. Initially, they'll have you do it not on this special stand, but just on your tripod or microphone stand in the main listening position, and you just follow the instructions along. So if I was going to do this, and of course I would have to have my amplifiers turned on, I could then set this up. And it does tell you, it gives you a warning here that you have your power amp assigned set to basic. And that's what I want. But if you wanted something else, it would also display that. And it says I have my speaker impedance set to 8 ohms. Now, I'm using external amps, so that doesn't matter. But my understanding is this has a value of either 8 or 6 ohm. And by setting it to the lower impedance, you do protect the unit a little bit more against overheating, but there could be some performance degradation. And I've heard other reviewers say that you're better just to leave it at 8 ohms, even if you have 4 or 6 ohm impedance speakers. So if I go in and hit enter here, it will go and do some measurements. Now, of course, I don't have the microphone in the right position here, but we have to be quiet. It's doing its calculations now, and this is just a throwaway calibration because I don't even have the mic in the right spot. But in fact, I would have had this in the main listening position. Now they're saying put this on the boomerang, and put it in position 1, and this would be facing the speaker, not facing the camera as I have it right now. But you get the sense. And so it says put into position 1, and it does some calibration. And now speaker position 2. This is all very quick. We're doing this as we're doing the video live. And position 3. And this is really going to be funky because I'm sitting in front of a speaker, so there's not going to be good results at all. And now position 4. And this one you put right at the top. So they're saying there could be a polarity error. Now, just like with the Denon Marantz products, I seem to get these polarity errors occasionally here. Now they're saying my front height ones may be inverted. I've run this both times, and sometimes it reports it, sometimes it doesn't. But anyhow, you know, double check your polarity if this is the case. If you feel confident about your wiring, you can just ignore it. But this has gone through and finished this. Now, when YPAO goes through its calibration, remember, we didn't change the speaker size. These are all initially set to small. With my particular Polk system, and I've got 3 generations of Polk speakers. We have the LSI front towers. We got the FX from the same generation on the sides. We've got LSI M on the rear, and we've got another generation, although I think it's from the same period as the LSI M, is my height ceiling speakers. It rates them all as large here, so it's going to keep some of the bass still coming through these speakers. On the distances, I find that when I'm not sitting in front of a speaker, notice here that the left front speaker, it had a distance way off. And of course, the microphone's not in the main listening position. So these speaker distances will all look funky here, but it calculates these pretty accurately when you have your microphone in the right position and then you're not standing in front of a speaker like I am right now. And you can do this in, of course, meters or feet. Levels, it will auto-adjust all the levels here. I'm probably going to go back through again and try something with the spatial audio calibration toolkit that we have, that Technodad and Joe and Tel do, and just double check all that. This is something pretty unique, is the angle, and this is where this specialized stand comes into place, and it calculates these angles pretty accurately. I'm going to go and show you one where I've calibrated this with actual, in the right positions with nothing obstructing it. And then it also calculates the height of your ceiling or height speakers, which they call present. So let's back out of this. I'm just going to cancel the save on that particular one, because that was just for demonstration purposes. Now, if I go back into the setting, as I said, we have under speaker, we have 4 speaker patterns. Here's this first one that I had done, pattern 1. And this was done, my first run of a YPAO, came out pretty good. And, if you look at the distances here, these are very accurate. Now, when I measure it, I have a 12 feet to the front speakers. Here it's measuring 11. The center channel is fairly right. These are pretty good. And my rear speakers are about 12 feet from my main listening position. So all of these are measuring really close, particularly the subwoofer, which is not always measured in a good way. On the levels, these are all the calibrations. Now I'm going to see how this compares to what I get off that spatial calibration CD. You can go in and change your speaker impedance here. These are still set up to 8 ohms. there's the Parametric EQ. So flat is the default when it comes out of YPAO, and what it's trying to do is each speaker independently has been tuned to do its thing and get to your ears in the right way. But if you go to front equalization, it's going to try to match the characteristics that it detected on your front speakers to everything else. So everything else is trying to sound like your front speakers. Natural, I think what it does there is it cuts down on some of the high frequencies. On the low frequency, it's trying to point out problems that you might have with your bass, and you can then go through and manually correct anything that looks odd. Now, I haven't become proficient in this, and this is something that I'm going to have to look into more closely. But you can go in through the Parametric EQ and go in and change it for any of the speakers, including the subwoofers is probably where it's most important, the Q and gain for different frequencies to adjust out any of the low frequency problems that has been detected by YPAO. And then through we'll just bypass the YPAO altogether. But you also have this choice to do full manual parametric EQ and not use YPAO, but use some sort of external tool. And as I said in the last video, I'm on the early beta testing with Joe and Tell for his Magic Bean solution. And initially, I'm feeling like I'm getting better results from Magic Beans than from these calibration systems that are built into the product. I need to do some more bench testing, listening testing before I really communicate on that. But very excited about what Joe is doing with all that. So that really, that sums up the initial view. I do have one more thing I want to point out is we're doing this through the built-in on-screen setup menus that are in the receiver and goes out to the video report. But you also have the option to use the web pages, and this is kind of a hidden secret. Now, if you were to go in, and part of what I do here is you'd have to go into your network and you'd have to make sure you have your network connection set up. I have it set up for wired, but I also tried wireless and that worked just fine. With this, it will do detection of wireless, etc., in different ways. The other thing that you want to do once you get hooked up on your network before you even do the web page is go into your system and do a firmware update. Now, I am at 1.96, which is the latest one. Now, when I did the update, I was on wireless, and it wouldn't do an update over the network for me but I was on an older rev. I was several revs back when this came out of the box. So I had a copy from the website of Yamaha onto USB stick, put it in the front of this, and then it worked and did the update, and I got it to 196. So I won't really know until the next update is available if I can do over-the-air updates. I'm suspecting that the early release that I had on here had an issue with over-the-air or something else I'm not aware of that I did wrong, but at least I was able to get it updated to 196, which is the latest available here in July of 2023. So once that's done, you can go in and you can go into what they call a web page setup. You would get the IP address from the setup and type that in. In my case, it's 10.0061. And when you first pull this up, you get just pretty basic information. And even if you hit advanced settings, it's really not that advanced. Where the power really comes into this, if you're somebody who wants to get into the details. Now, this initial web setting of where you can set the network name, network settings, do firmware updates and things like that might be good for some basic things. But if you do a /setup, and this I don't believe is documented in the manual. So IP address /setup gives you to a whole other set of parameters. And I find this is a lot more slick to work in versus the on-screen menus, particularly if you're getting in and doing some of that parametric EQ work here. So we're going to get into some of this stuff on a subsequent video. At this point, what are your thoughts on the Yamaha Aventage RX-A8A flagship AV receiver? My initial impressions are pretty good. Now, after I ran that YPAO configuration, it sounded to me better than without YPAO on. And here's another thing. We're going to do some deeper comparisons against the Marantz Cinema 50 and the Emotiva RMC1, which we have in-house in a future video. It is faring very well. In fact, I think it may have given the competition to the Emotiva. Definitely better than the Cinema 50. So stay tuned for that. Please, give us your feedback on this video. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you want to take your involvement to the next level, go to www.patreon.com/Ripewave, and you can always hit that one-time thanks button. We give us a one-time donation. That's always appreciated. A lot of you are starting to do that now. I thank you very much. And you can always hit the bell icon so you will be notified when the next video is posted. Until then, keep evolving your audio experience.